Have you ever smelled what people call paradise? Not the fake paradise, not the sweet plastic smell of coconut sunscreen, expensive perfume, and hotel lobby air conditioning. I mean the real one. The kind of place where nature seems to have built the perfect background for human happiness. If you land in Cancun or Tulum today, in 2026, that's the first thing that hits you. The heavy, humid Caribbean air, salt from the sea, palm trees moving slowly in the wind, and mixed into all of that, the smell of money. Big money, easy money. You leave the airport, step into a cold shuttle bus, and drive down a perfect highway lined with resorts and tropical gardens. Everything looks smooth, clean, and safe. Your whole world becomes the golden bracelet on your wrist that says, all-inclusive. For a moment, it feels like you found heaven. Your biggest problem is choosing between a margarita and a piña colada. The beach is white, the ocean is blue, music plays softly near the pool. People laugh. Everything tells you, relax, you're safe here. But that feeling is the biggest illusion of the 21st century. It is the most expensive and most cynical performance ever created for over 30 million tourists every year. Because if you could turn off that relaxing lounge music, if you could look behind the high walls of your luxury resort covered in flowers, you would not see paradise. You would see hell. You would not smell the ocean breeze. You would smell blood, fresh blood, soaking into that same white sand faster than water. The Mexico sold to you in glossy travel brochures no longer exists. It is a ghost, a hologram, a beautiful picture hiding the rotting body of a country that has already died, but somehow forgot to fall into the grave. Think about Acapulco. 40 years ago, it was the symbol of Hollywood glamour. Frank Sinatra went there. Elvis Presley went there. It was the jewel of the Pacific. Today, Acapulco is one of the murder capitals of the world. A place where human life costs less than a bullet, where taxi drivers pay protection money just for the right not to be cut into pieces, where police are afraid to answer emergency calls after sunset. And you think Cancun is different? You think the Riviera Maya is protected? Wake up. Right now, while tourists from Europe and the United States are putting sunscreen on their backs, mass graves are being discovered in the jungle just a few miles away from the hotel zone. Graves filled with people who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, or people who refused to pay the local boss his tax for breathing. This contrast is enough to drive a person insane. On one side, there is endless celebration. Tequila flows like water. Music never stops. Tourists dance by the pool. Laughter fills the air. Luxury yachts move slowly across the bright blue sea. Everything looks like a commercial for the perfect life. And on the other side, sometimes literally across the same road, there is a war zone. Not a metaphor. A real war. Cartels use explosive drones, heavy machine guns, armored monster trucks covered with homemade steel plates, and soldiers with military training. Entire towns live under the sound of gunfire. Roads become front lines. Villages disappear overnight. Yet when we look at a map, we still see the word Mexico. We see borders. We see the flag with the eagle and the snake. We see a president standing behind a podium. And we assume this is still a normal country, maybe with some serious problems, but still a functioning state. That is the lie. That is the old way of thinking. Because a real state is not a flag. It is not speeches. It is not official ceremonies. A real state is simple. It has a monopoly on violence. It can protect its citizens. It controls its territory. It decides who has the right to use force. So ask yourself one question. Who actually controls Mexico? Because the answer is not the government. The answer is the cartels. And even the word cartel feels too small now. It sounds like smugglers hiding in the shadows, running from police. That world is gone. These are not gangs anymore. These are corporations of death. They do not hide. They do not run. They are the power. They build roads where the government cannot. They hand out food to poor families. They decide disputes. They deliver punishment. They act as judges, police, and executioners at the same time. Their authority does not come from laws written on paper. It comes from two things: silver and lead. Money if you obey. A bullet if you refuse. This is the real constitution of modern Mexico. Democracy here is often just a bad joke. Journalism can become a death sentence, and every dollar a tourist spends on a souvenir, a bottle of tequila, or a luxury dinner often ends up somewhere deeper in the machine, helping buy another rifle, another truck, another magazine for an AK-47. We are not traveling through a country. We are traveling through the ruins of a civilization. This is not just about crime. It is about the collapse of the basic agreement that allows society to exist. The idea that tomorrow will be safer than today. The idea that the police protect you. The idea that justice exists. All of that is breaking apart. And to understand how one of the richest, most culturally powerful regions on Earth turned into the stage for one of the most brutal social experiments of modern times, we have to go deeper, much deeper. Because this is not a story about bad people doing bad things. This is a story about what happens when hope dies, when fear becomes law, when survival matters more than morality, and when the only people left standing are the ones willing to shoot first and feel nothing after. There is no happy ending waiting at the end of this road, only the full anatomy of collapse. To understand how deep Mexico has fallen, we need to stop looking at political maps and schoolbook definitions of government. Because those things describe a world that no longer exists. On paper, the United Mexican States is still a federal democratic republic. It has a constitution, it has elections, it has courts, senators, governors, and a president speaking from the National Palace in Mexico City. On paper, everything looks normal. But paper is cheap. Reality is expensive. And in the hard, dusty, bloody reality of 2026, all of those institutions have become empty shells. Decorations on a movie set. A stage built to convince the world that the country is still functioning, while behind the curtain, everything is already collapsing. The official government in Mexico City no longer truly governs the country. It manages press conferences, it manages public relations, it manages offshore bank accounts, ministers in expensive suits, senators with polished speeches, and even the president himself have become administrators of chaos. Their job is not to fix the ship. Their job is to pretend the ship is still sailing while the lower decks are already full of water and bodies. The real power in Mexico does not wear ties. It wears tactical vests. It wears balaclavas. It wears gold chains over body armor. It does not drive government sedans with flashing lights. It drives armored SUVs with Browning .50 caliber machine guns mounted in the back. You think that sounds like an action movie? Look at the elections. Recent election cycles in Mexico became some of the bloodiest in the Western Hemisphere. Candidates were hunted like animals. They were shot during rallies, in front of cameras, in front of voters, in broad daylight. Almost 100 politicians were murdered in a single year. Think about that. Nearly 100 people who tried to enter politics without asking permission from the local boss were simply erased. That is not democracy. That is natural selection. The winner is not the person with the best ideas. The winner is the person most loyal to the cartel. The one willing to kiss the ring. In huge parts of the country, Guerrero, Michoacán, Tamaulipas, Sinaloa, The idea of the state has almost disappeared completely. There is no police you can call for help, because during the day, the police patrol the streets in uniform. At night, they work for the cartel, kidnapping people and collecting extortion payments. There are no real courts, because any judge brave enough to sentence a gang member may wake up the next morning and find the severed head of his dog, or worse, his child, placed at his front door. This is not corruption. This is total terror. Fear is the only currency that still has real value. The death of the state did not happen in one day. It was slow, like gangrene. It started in the fingers, small border towns where smugglers were always part of the landscape. Then, step by step, cell by cell, the infection spread upward. It consumed city halls, governor's offices, police departments, military command. And finally, it reached the heart of federal power itself. Today, a Mexican official is usually one of two things: a corpse or an accomplice. There is no third option. Neutrality does not exist here. You either take the silver or you receive the lead. And maybe the most terrifying part is this: people got used to it. Ordinary people accepted it as normal, like bad weather, something you cannot change, only survive. When an armed convoy from the Jalisco New Generation Cartel drives through the center of a city in broad daylight, 30 armored vehicles moving like a regular army, gang logos visible on the doors, and nobody stops them, not the National Guard, not the police, nobody. You understand something important. Mexico's sovereignty is over. The country has broken into dozens of feudal kingdoms. Each local commander is king, judge, and god. He decides who lives and who dies. He decides what business survives and what family disappears. We look at the map and see one country. But in reality, it is a patchwork of invisible borders, checkpoints, and territories ruled by different laws. When you drive into Zacatecas, you're crossing a border more dangerous than any airport checkpoint. Your constitutional rights disappear. You stop being a citizen. You become a biological object, a resource, something that can be used, sold, or destroyed. A state that cannot protect its people loses the reason for its own existence. It becomes a parasite. It still collects taxes. It still gives speeches. But in return, it offers only lies. Modern Mexico is a zombie state. It moves. It signs international agreements. It smiles for diplomats. But inside, it is dead. Its institutions have been eaten by the worms of corruption. Its soul was sold to the devil for a suitcase full of dollars. And the worst part? This process may already be irreversible, because you cannot revive something that willingly chose profit over survival. You cannot rebuild trust in a place where everyone learned that trust gets you killed. Forget everything Hollywood taught you about gangsters. Forget the romantic image of outlaws in cowboy hats, drinking tequila at sunset, firing pistols from the hip like some stylish criminal legend. That version of crime is old, cheap, and completely disconnected from reality. What Mexico faces in 2026 is not street crime. It is not gangs. It is not a few violent men hiding from the police. It is something much bigger. It is a parallel state, a corporate empire built on fear. The Sinaloa Cartel, Jalisco New Generation, Gulf Cartel, Los Zetas. These are not criminal groups in the old sense. They are highly organized global corporations. Their level of management, logistics, and long-term planning would embarrass many CEOs from the Forbes list. They are efficient, cold, professional, and they are everywhere. Think of them like multinational holding companies. They have vertical integration. They diversify risk. They manage supply chains across continents. They recruit talent. They invest. They adapt faster than governments. They have human resources departments. Yes, Real recruitment systems. They search universities for the best chemistry students to create stronger synthetic drugs. They look for engineers who can build tunnels, encrypted communication systems, and drone modifications. They hire accountants to wash money cleaner than legal corporations do. They have media departments. Professional propaganda teams create polished videos for TikTok and Instagram, making cartel life look glamorous. Young men with gold chains, luxury cars, designer clothes, stacks of cash, women, music, power. It is not just violence. It is branding. It is marketing. It is psychological recruitment. They understand that if you control imagination, you control the next generation. They have logistics networks so advanced they can move a ton of product faster than some legal shipping companies. Cocaine, methamphetamine, fentanyl, weapons, human beings. Anything with demand becomes inventory. Anything profitable becomes business. This is not chaos. This is management. The drug trade alone generates hundreds of billions of dollars. That is not criminal money anymore. That is economic gravity. Cash flows across borders like rivers. It enters construction companies, hotel chains, pharmacy networks, avocado farms, trucking businesses, real estate projects, cryptocurrency wallets, luxury tourism, and legal exports. The money becomes invisible, clean, respectable, untouchable. Cartels are no longer just drug traffickers. They are diversified monsters. They steal fuel by drilling directly into pipelines owned by the state oil company Pemex, taking billions in gasoline. They control iron ore mining and illegally export raw materials to China. They dominate the avocado and lime industries, taxing every truck, every box, every farmer. They control migration routes, treating desperate people trying to reach the United States like moving livestock. They run kidnapping networks, extortion systems, protection rackets, sex trafficking operations, cyber fraud, counterfeit medicine, illegal logging. Nothing is too small if it creates profit. Nothing is too brutal if it improves margins. This is the real business model. Absolute cruelty plus absolute efficiency. Human life is just an expense report, a line in a spreadsheet. If destroying an entire village creates a safer smuggling route, the village disappears. No anger, no revenge, no emotion, just business. A decision made the same way a corporation closes an unprofitable office. This is what makes it so terrifying. Because monsters are easier to fight when they are irrational. These people are rational. They optimize, they calculate, they scale, they use the newest technology available. They build homemade submarines to move cocaine across oceans. They use encrypted satellite communication systems that intelligence agencies struggle to break. They deploy kamikaze drones carrying explosives. They use Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifles, powerful enough to destroy armored vehicles from long distance. They run armored convoys that look like private armies. This is fourth-generation warfare, not rebels fighting a state. A corporation fighting a weaker corporation called government, and often winning. The leaders of these organizations are not always uneducated killers from poor villages. Many are highly educated. Some studied business. Some understand finance better than politicians. They wear Armani suits. They live in penthouses in Dubai, Madrid, Miami. They manage empires of death through encrypted messaging apps while drinking expensive whiskey on rooftops far from the blood. Their money moves through stock markets. Their lawyers work in glass towers in New York and London. Their influence reaches banks, customs offices, ports, police departments, and presidential campaigns. This is not underground. This is integrated. We like to think crime is a disease inside a healthy society, something abnormal, something outside the system. Mexico proves something much darker. Crime can become an alternative form of government, sometimes more efficient than the official one. Cartels do not just threaten people, they provide services, they repair roads, they pay for funerals, they hand out food during disasters, they sponsor local festivals, they help poor families when the government does nothing. Why? Because loyalty is cheaper than permanent war. If the state disappears, people will support whoever keeps the lights on, even if that person also cuts off heads. That is how legitimacy is rebuilt in hell. Violence becomes public relations. Torture videos are uploaded online like official press releases. Bodies are left hanging from bridges with messages attached. Not random brutality, strategic communication, a message to rivals, a warning to journalists, a lesson to civilians, a demonstration to the state. Do not test us. This is marketing through terror, fear as advertisement, and it works, because fear is unforgettable. Every beheading, every mass grave, every disappeared teenager, every burned bus, every mayor executed in public, all of it becomes part of the same message. We are stronger than the law, and often they are right. This machine grows because the world keeps feeding it. Consumers in Los Angeles, Berlin, Sydney, and London keep buying the product. Politicians keep taking the money. Banks keep washing the profits. Luxury markets keep absorbing dirty wealth. And ordinary people keep pretending organized crime is someone else's problem. But it is already global. The cancer spread. From the ports of Rotterdam to the streets of Melbourne. From clubs in Ibiza to suburbs in Texas. Mexico is not an isolated tragedy. It is the laboratory. The prototype. The future warning. A place where criminal power stopped pretending to be separate from normal life and simply became part of the system itself. This is not a failed state fighting crime. This is a state being replaced by a more effective competitor. And the competitor does not believe in laws, only results. That is why calling them cartels feels too soft, too small, too outdated. They are not gangs, they are death corporations, and their stock keeps rising every single day. In this new world, where national flags have faded into decoration and constitutions are little more than paper for wrapping street tacos, only one real law remains. It is simple, brutal, universal, and everyone understands it. That law is called plata o plomo, silver or lead, money or a bullet. People outside Mexico often hear this phrase and think it belongs to some Netflix crime show, a dramatic line written for television. It is not. It is the basic survival rule of modern life. It is the operating system of the country. And sooner or later, every person faces the same choice. The police officer, the mayor of a small town, the journalist, the shop owner, the teacher, the doctor, the farmer, the taxi driver, even the priest, everyone. The offer always comes the same way. First comes silver, a payment, a favor, a bribe, a percentage, protection money, a business opportunity, a polite conversation with armed men who smile too much. Take this money, look the other way, stay quiet, do your job, but only the way we allow. If you accept, you become part of the machine. You keep your life, you protect your family, you survive, you lose your soul, but your children still eat dinner. That is silver. But if you refuse, if conscience wakes up, if dignity matters more than fear, then comes lead, a bullet in the head. And not only for you, for your wife, your son, your parents, your brother. Because punishment in this system is never individual. It is collective. It is designed to teach everyone watching. Resistance must look expensive. This choice destroys people. It grinds morality into dust. It breaks the spine of society. In every normal country, police and the army are supposed to protect citizens. In Mexico, for millions of ordinary people, they have become the first thing to fear. Because they made their choice long ago. They chose silver. The local policeman knows the cartel pays more in 1 month than the government pays in a year. He knows the cartel has better weapons, better intelligence, better protection. And most importantly, the cartel never forgets. The state forgets immediately. If he dies serving the law, his widow gets a speech and maybe a folded flag. If he works for the cartel, his family survives. That is not ideology. That is math. So when you see a police car on an empty road in Tamaulipas, you do not feel relief. You feel cold fear. Because you do not know who is inside. A law officer? Or a paid hunter in uniform who will sell your location for $100? The army was once seen as the last honest institution. Even that collapsed. Generals became business partners of drug lords. Entire elite military units deserted and crossed to the other side. Not because they were weak, because the other side offered more power, more money, more freedom, more survival. The most famous example was Los Zetas, former Special Forces soldiers trained by the state, paid by taxpayers, who took military discipline and battlefield tactics and brought them directly into organized crime. They did not behave like street criminals. They operated like occupation forces. They used scorched earth strategy. They wiped out entire communities. They turned fear into military doctrine. They taught the cartels how to think like armies. That changed everything. The line between criminal and authority disappeared. Now it is often the same face, just wearing a different mask depending on the time of day. For the ordinary citizen, life becomes a trap. You cannot report extortion to the police because the police will immediately call the extortionist. You cannot run because the cartel sees everything. You cannot trust your neighbor. You cannot trust your cousin. Sometimes you cannot trust your own child, because everyone is trying to survive. In this system, innocence does not exist. There are only the living and the dead, those who pay and those who collect. This is not just corruption, it is total corrosion of human trust. Neighbors inform on neighbors to earn favor with the local boss. Teenagers become halcones, hawks, standing on street corners with cheap radios, reporting every stranger, every police car, every unusual movement. They do it for sneakers, for lunch money, for status, for survival. Children grow up learning that loyalty belongs to whoever pays, not to law, not to country, not to morality. Trust becomes a dangerous mistake. Kindness becomes a risk. Silence becomes wisdom. Fear becomes the national language. It enters houses. It lives in the walls. People stop making eye contact. They learn not to ask questions. They learn not to notice bodies on the roadside, not to react to gunshots at night, not to remember names. This collective blindness becomes a survival skill, because if you see too much, lead will find you too. The entire country becomes a giant prison without visible fences. No barbed wire, no prison guards in towers, because the prisoners guard each other. Everyone watches everyone. Everyone knows someone connected to someone. Everyone understands the rules without needing them explained. This is social control through terror, and it works better than law ever did. The emotional cost is impossible to measure. A whole generation of children is growing up inside this moral disaster. Children who do not know another system. For them, strength is truth. Violence is authority. Fear is respect. Human life has no stable value. Only usefulness. What happens to a society when that becomes normal? What happens 20 years later when those children become adults? You cannot rebuild a country with people who learned since childhood that survival requires betrayal. You cannot teach trust to someone raised inside permanent suspicion. The damage moves deeper than politics. It enters psychology, culture, family, faith, identity. It becomes inherited trauma, passed from parent to child like a family heirloom. The lure of silver and lead, does not only kill bodies, it kills citizenship, it kills responsibility, it kills the idea that honesty matters. And once that dies, rebuilding becomes almost impossible. Because roads can be repaired, buildings can be rebuilt, governments can be replaced. But a society that forgets how to trust itself, that is much harder to save. This is the true collapse. Not burned cars, not cartel gunfights, not dramatic headlines. The real collapse happens quietly, at dinner tables, in classrooms, in marriages, in the small daily decisions where people stop asking what is right and start asking only what keeps them alive until tomorrow. That is how civilizations die, not with one explosion, but with millions of people slowly learning that morality has become a luxury they can no longer afford. It is very easy to sit in a comfortable apartment somewhere in Washington, New York, London, or Berlin and say that Mexico destroyed itself. It is easy to point at corruption, violence, and chaos and call it a failed state. It is easy to blame Mexicans for Mexico, but that explanation is lazy. And worse, it is dishonest. Because the Mexican nightmare could never exist without its biggest sponsor, its silent partner, and its most powerful customer, the United States of America. The border between these two countries is not just a line on a map. It is the busiest artery of death in the world. It is a giant exchange system. Northbound, flowing into American veins and nostrils, go cocaine, meth, heroin, fentanyl, and every other chemical escape from reality. Southbound, flowing back into Mexico, comes something just as deadly: guns. Endless rivers of guns, steel, gunpowder, lead. People often ask how cartels became so powerful. How did men who once moved drugs in pickup trucks become private armies stronger than local governments? The answer is simple: because someone armed them. And most of that weaponry did not come from secret jungle factories. It came from the United States. Look at the arsenal of modern cartels: AR-15 rifles, Glock pistols, Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifles powerful enough to destroy armored vehicles, miniguns capable of firing thousands of rounds per minute, grenade launchers, armor-piercing ammunition, even portable anti-air systems used to attack military helicopters. This is not improvised crime. This is military-grade warfare, and almost every weapon has the same invisible label: made in USA. Some estimates say 70% of cartel weapons come from the North. Others say the real number may be closer to 90%. However you calculate it, the truth is the same. The cartels are heavily armed by the legal gun market of Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. This happens through an entire industry of straw buyers, people with clean records, American citizens, no criminal history. They walk into a gun store, legally buy 10 rifles, sign the paperwork, smile for the camera, and leave. A few hours later, those same rifles are in cartel hands. Simple, clean, profitable. For a few $100s, someone sells death wholesale. American gun laws, protected under the sacred language of the Second Amendment, have effectively become the supply chain for the army destroying Mexico. And Washington knows it. They know the routes, they know the names, they know the stores, they know the buyers. But the gun lobby is powerful. Too powerful. Stopping the flow is politically expensive. And sometimes, maybe even economically inconvenient. Remember Operation Fast and Furious? A scandal so absurd it sounded fictional. Federal agents allowed thousands of weapons to be sold to traffickers, hoping they could track them and identify cartel leaders. Instead, they lost control of the weapons completely. Those same guns were later used to kill Mexicans, and American agents too. That was not strategy. That was criminal stupidity. Or worse, quiet complicity. But guns are only half the equation. The other half is demand. Cartels do not exist because Mexico is violent. They exist because America is addicted. The United States is the largest drug market on earth. It is the engine pumping money through cartel veins. If Americans stopped buying cocaine and swallowing fentanyl, entire criminal empires would collapse almost overnight. But they do not stop, because addiction is profitable. And profit does not ask moral questions. Cities like Philadelphia, San Francisco, and parts of Los Angeles now look like scenes from a slow zombie apocalypse. People folding over on sidewalks, people rotting alive from fentanyl made in Mexican labs using Chinese chemical precursors. And for every pill swallowed in the north, money flows south. Billions of dollars. Cash. Untraceable. Packed into hidden compartments, cars, trucks, and suitcases. That money returns to Mexico to buy judges, police chiefs, governors, customs officers, military officers, and entire elections. Drugs go north. Corruption comes back south. It is a perfect business loop. And then there are the banks. Respectable banks. Famous names. American banks. European banks. Institutions with glass towers and expensive lawyers. For years, many of them quietly helped wash narco money. Billions of dollars passed through the financial system because dirty money still spends beautifully. As long as the paperwork looked clean enough, nobody asked difficult questions. Because money does not smell, even when it smells like bodies. Mexico became America's backyard drain, a place where the violence required to support American comfort is outsourced, a dumping ground, a pressure release valve. The blood stays on the southern side of the wall. The pleasure stays on the northern side. That arrangement is convenient, very convenient. A weak Mexico means cheap labor, cheap manufacturing, cheap agriculture, cheap political pressure. Chaos can be useful if it stays controlled. A permanently unstable neighbor is easier to dominate. So while American politicians give speeches about democracy and human rights, their own policies help fuel the war every single day. Their consumers buy the drugs. Their stores sell the guns. Their banks wash the profits. Their corporations benefit from the imbalance. Their border becomes the conveyor belt of death. This does not mean Mexico is innocent. Far from it. Mexican politicians sold their own country, piece by piece. Police chiefs took the money. Governors made deals. Presidents looked away. Generals became partners. Local elites learned that corruption was safer than resistance. Responsibility is shared. But pretending this is only a Mexican problem is a lie. It is a North American system, a joint enterprise, a cross-border machine powered by greed on both sides. Mexico provides the battlefield. America provides the appetite. And together, they produce the perfect ecosystem for permanent war. So the next time someone says Mexico is simply broken, ask a harder question. Who profits from the break? Because failed states are rarely accidents. Very often, they are profitable designs. And as long as the machine keeps making money, nobody truly wants to turn it off. Not in Mexico City, not in Washington, not on Wall Street, not anywhere that still benefits from blood staying invisible. When hope dies, when the state becomes the executioner instead of the protector, and when human life becomes cheaper than a bullet, people start looking for protection somewhere else. They stop believing in institutions. They stop believing in politicians. Eventually, they even stop believing in God. Because how do you keep faith in a merciful heaven when your son is dissolved in acid, your daughter is sold into trafficking, and the police officer taking your report is working for the same men who destroyed your family? At some point, traditional religion stops giving answers. The Catholic Church, with its sermons about patience, forgiveness, humility, and turning the other cheek, begins to feel powerless in a place where evil arrives every single day with an assault rifle. How do you preach peace to people living inside war? How do you ask forgiveness from someone who buried their child in pieces? You cannot. And in that vacuum, in that spiritual black hole where hope used to live, something else grows. Something darker, something honest in its brutality. The cult of Santa Muerte, Holy Death. This is not just superstition. It is one of the fastest growing religious movements in the Western Hemisphere, with millions of followers across Mexico and far beyond it. Walk through markets like Sonora in Mexico City or the poorer neighborhoods of Tepito, and you will see her everywhere. A skeleton dressed like a saint, a female figure in robes, a scythe in one hand, the world in the other. Candles, flowers, gold chains, offerings of tequila, cigarettes, money, apples, perfume, and sometimes even blood. People build shrines for her on street corners, inside taxis, in kitchens, on prison walls, and inside cartel safe houses. Why her? Because death is the only force in Mexico that feels truly fair. Death does not take bribes. Death does not care if you are rich or poor. Death visits the drug lord in his mansion and the child in the slum with the same cold hand. She is the great equalizer, and people no longer pray for heaven. They pray for survival. They ask Santa Muerte for practical things, protection from bullets, safe passage for a cocaine shipment, revenge against enemies, success in business, a husband returning alive from a gunfight, a son not disappearing on the road home. This is religion adapted for collapse, not salvation, immediate survival. At first, Santa Muerte was mostly associated with the people society rejected: gang members, prostitutes, prisoners, drug traffickers, sex workers, thieves, and the forgotten poor. People who felt abandoned by both the state and the church. But now, taxi drivers pray to her, police officers pray to her, housewives pray to her, street vendors pray to her. Even politicians quietly keep her statues hidden in private rooms. Because fear does not care about social class. Fear democratizes belief. Cartels embrace this cult completely. For many sicarios, Santa Muerte is not symbolic. She is operational. They tattoo her image on their chests. They wear her medals under their body armor. Before kidnappings, before executions, before torture sessions, they light candles and ask for blessing. They pray before killing. Think about that. Murder becomes ritual. Violence becomes sacred. Execution becomes devotion. This is not religion in the traditional sense. It is spiritual adaptation to permanent trauma. But Santa Muerte is not alone. There is also Jesus Malverde, the so-called narco saint, a bandit-turned-folk protector. There are Santeria rituals, occult practices, blood offerings, folk magic. The spiritual life of modern Mexico has become a mirror of its social collapse. When society breaks, religion mutates. The old moral map disappears. Good and evil stop being clear. An assassin who donates money to a Santa Muerte shrine may still believe he is righteous. A grieving mother praying for the death of her son's killers may believe she is asking for justice. Everyone builds their own moral system from the ruins. This is spiritual civil war. Traditional priests fight against it. Catholic leaders call Santa Muerte satanic. They warn people it is a cult of death. But their churches grow emptier, while the shrines of Holy Death overflow with flowers and candles. Why? Because the church promises paradise after death. Santa Muerte promises protection before death. And for people living in daily terror, tomorrow matters more than eternity. That is the brutal truth. People do not need philosophy when gunshots wake them at 2 a.m. They need something that feels like immediate defense, something that looks them in the eye and says, yes, the world is cruel, and I understand. Santa Muerte does not pretend the world is good. That honesty gives her power. And when you stare into the empty eye sockets of a decorated skull covered in glitter and feathers, you are looking at the true face of modern Mexico, a country engaged to death, dancing with it, sleeping beside it, making deals with it. This is not simply a religious trend. It is a collapse of the national soul. Mexico has always had a unique relationship with death. Think about Dia de los Muertos. For centuries, death was treated with respect, memory, even humor. It was part of life. People honored ancestors. Families remembered the dead. There was sadness, but also peace. Now that relationship has changed. It is no longer acceptance. It is negotiation. People are not honoring death. They are trying to bribe the executioner. That is something very different. It is surrender. A spiritual surrender to violence. A nation trying to survive by making peace with the thing destroying it. And while this cult continues to grow, while chapels to death rise faster than schools or hospitals, hope for real recovery becomes smaller. Because a society that begins praying to death is already preparing itself for extinction. You cannot build a future if your deepest faith is in survival, not possibility. You cannot dream of tomorrow if your only prayer is making it through tonight. That is the final poison. Not just violence, not just corruption, but the moment a nation stops believing life can be better and starts believing death can at least be negotiated. That is when collapse becomes cultural, generational, almost permanent. And that may be the most terrifying thing of all. Not that Mexico is dying, but that millions of people have already emotionally accepted the funeral. We have reached the end of this journey. We pulled back the curtain. We looked behind the beaches, behind the resorts, behind the tequila ads and the tourist postcards. We walked through the mass graves, the ghost towns, the cartel checkpoints, the broken police departments, the abandoned churches, and the silence of people who no longer believe anyone is coming to save them. Now we have to say the one thing politicians in Washington and Mexico City are afraid to say, even in a whisper. What is happening to Mexico is not a crisis. It is not temporary instability. It is not a bad political cycle. It is not something that can be fixed with another election, another speech, another IMF loan, or another anti-corruption campaign. This is agony. This is the terminal stage of state collapse. The cancer has already spread too far. It reached the courts, the police, the army, the economy, the schools, the churches, and worst of all, the minds of the people. The patient we still call the United Mexican States is already dead. Its body just keeps moving because history has momentum. We often hear the phrase, failed state, and people imagine faraway places like Somalia or Afghanistan, distant ruins somewhere on the other side of the world. But the truth is much more uncomfortable. A failed state exists right here, directly under the soft belly of a global superpower, sharing a border of more than 3,000 kilometers with the United States. And the most dangerous part? This collapse may already be irreversible, because Mexico crossed the point of no return. In physics, there is the idea of an event horizon, the invisible border around a black hole. Once something crosses it, not even light can escape. Mexico crossed that line. The cartels are now stronger than the state, not only militarily, but financially, socially, and psychologically. They are not outsiders anymore. They are the new aristocracy, the new nobility, the new landlords of fear, and they will never give that power back voluntarily. To remove them would require total war, not police reform, not better laws. War, a full-scale civil war that would drown the continent in blood and create millions of refugees. No government will choose that. No president wants to be remembered as the man who turned North America into Syria. so the disease continues. And even if we ignore the violence, look at the physical foundation of the country itself. Mexico City, one of the largest cities on Earth, is sinking, literally. Built on the remains of an ancient lake, the city is collapsing into the ground, in some places by nearly half a meter per year. At the same time, water is disappearing. Millions of people already receive water only for a few hours a day, or they buy it from water mafias who control deliveries like another cartel. Day zero is coming, the day when the taps run dry. And when thirst meets corruption, violence becomes exponential. A megacity without water is not an urban problem. It is a civilization-ending event. Imagine 20 million desperate people fighting for drinking water, while criminal groups already control the streets. That is not politics. That is Mad Max with skyscrapers. Environmental collapse will become the final accelerator of social collapse. What comes next is not one Mexico. It is fragmentation, balkanization, the country breaking into pieces, northern narco-states controlled by cartels, southern guerrilla territories ruled by armed factions, tourist enclaves protected by private armies where foreigners drink cocktails while 10 miles away, villages burn, corporate islands of security floating inside oceans of violence. This future is not science fiction. It is already knocking on the door with the stock of a rifle. The world still prefers denial. As long as tequila keeps pouring and mariachi bands keep playing, people pretend everything is fine. But the music has already stopped. What remains is the sound of approaching collapse, and collapse never stays inside borders. It spills outward, through migration waves that will hit the United States, through organized crime spreading into Europe, Canada, and Australia, through fentanyl deaths, through black money entering global banks, through violence becoming exportable. Mexico is not an isolated tragedy. It is a warning, a lesson for every country that believes civilization is permanent. It is not. Civilization is thin, fragile, a very delicate layer stretched over chaos. And if greed, corruption, and fear eat through it long enough, that layer tears very fast. Mexico is not just a story about Mexico. It is a mirror, a picture of what happens when institutions become businesses, when justice becomes optional, and when society decides survival matters more than truth. The eagle on the Mexican flag no longer devours the snake. Now the snake is wrapped around its neck, and it is tightening. We are watching the end of an era. We are watching one of the richest and most beautiful cultures on Earth dissolve in acid and blood. And if this truth makes you uncomfortable, good. It should. Because discomfort means you are still capable of feeling something. Do not look away. Look directly into the abyss. Because the moment we stop looking, the abyss starts growing in silence. And one day, we may realize too late that it was never only Mexico standing at the edge. It was all of us,